Yo, what's good, boys? We are back at it again with another MLB The Show 25 video for you guys. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down just what makes cards good. So, the tier list content's awesome, but I also want to teach you guys how to fish. You need to be able to tell for yourselves what cards are worth using, because a card can be perfect and I won't like their swing and I won't recommend them as highly. So, just so you can use cards, you can find your favorite cards, stuff like that, as well as, there'll be gaps in my tier list content. Maybe I go the Seabread route at some point and I stop making content on the game. I want you guys to be able to tell for yourselves what cards are good. You should not have to have somebody tell you. I appreciate everybody consuming the tier list content, and this won't be like a one-for-one, decider. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, between forgotten college lectures and the Pythagorean theorem, I have an almanac of like every swing of most players in the game and if they're good or not traditionally. So there's always X factors and variables that you can't really account for. But I'm going to try and do my best to describe to you guys what makes a card good in Diamond Dynasty in MLB. So if you enjoy the content, like, subscribe, all that. Let's get into it. So this is going to be a long one probably. So we'll start with Ted Williams, because why not? New card, hype card, has pretty much everything I want to talk about. So first thing is contact. I feel like a lot of you know what contact does. Influences your PCI size. It also influences your timing window. So a lot of people like to attribute all of that to vision, whereas contact actually also plays a role in your timing windows. So in theory, contact is not super important, because if you were just perfect, then you wouldn't need it. It wouldn't matter how small your PCI got. But it's always a helpful stat, and that's why it's really important on like GOAT and Legend, because you're already working with really small PCIs, and so being able to get that to be as large as possible matters quite a bit. Whereas on lower difficulties like All-Star, like a 90 contact PCI is already going to be like half the strike zone. It's not as important, but I did want to highlight that it does influence your timing windows. That's why, like, you could use a Joey Gallo with 90 contact right and 30 vision and still hit perfects with them. Vision is probably the most overblown stat in the game. We'll get to it, but I do want to start with contact. So next on our hitting attributes here is power. Power is pretty self-explanatory. It's how hard you hit the ball. If you hit a perfect and you have 40 power, it's probably going to be a line out more times than not. So power is important for actually being rewarded for your hits. If you don't have a lot of power, you're not going to get rewarded a ton. Next up, vision. Like I said, probably the most overblown, overrated stat in the game. Is Ted Williams having perfect vision awesome? Yeah. If he had 70 vision, would I not use him? Of course I would still use him. Like, he's still a perfect card. This card could have 80 vision. He would still be perfect. Vision is additive to a card. I would not, if vision's the reason you're saying you're not using Aaron Judge, if vision's the reason you're saying you're not going to use the 99 Mike Trout that comes out, then you're playing yourself. So, discipline doesn't matter. Used to affect check swings. Now I believe vision does. Vision also reduces your strikeout rate. It gives you more foul balls, which I think if you're relying on foul balls, then you're kind of playing the game wrong. So just another way that vision is not super important. Vision is proportional to kind of how good you are at the game. Because if you can just find your timing windows and aren't super reliant on foul balls, vision is not a super important stat. And then we have clutch. So clutch functions like contact, except when you have a runner in scoring position. So second base, third base. And it also plays off your contact. So if your clutch is really bad and your contact's really high, your PCI is going to be smaller even when you have nobody on base. And same goes. If you have really high clutch and really poor contact, your PCI is actually going to be smaller even with runners on base. That's a thing about like Chase Headley. When Chase Headley's hitting off a lefty, the clutch does not outright replace the contact. They kind of come together and you get an aggregate of those two numbers. So that's something that I think a lot of people don't understand. But it's not super important at the same time. Let's see, what else? So, should talk about how these hitting attributes interact with each other. If your contact is significantly higher than your power, you're going to be a contact hitter. That's going to make you more prone to line drives, aka getting scammed. It's part of the reason why, like, Terry Pendleton and stuff, a lot of people feel like, you know, they get those sinking liners that dip in front of fielders. It's because they don't get super good launch angles. They don't get like 27, 28, 29 degree launch angles that are prone to home runs. They get like 14-degree launch angles. They get right over the first baseman's head, and then it dips in the outfield. So with those and with low power, you're just going to get scammed out of home runs. Those swings that would be doubles off the wall, home runs, are just going to be line outs to the outfielders. So that's why you prefer to stay away from contact hitters. But if you hit a perfect, you might still hit a home run with a contact hitter. It's not the end of the world. Okay, if contact and power are similar to each other, you're going to be a balanced hitter, kind of in between. You know, towards the end of the year, most hitters are balanced hitters because the attributes cap at 125, and we don't really see a ton of difference when you get like 99 cards. Like the worst split you'll probably see is like a Santander card that has like 105, 125. So you don't see a ton of balanced, or you don't see a ton of like power or contact hitters towards the end of the year. And then your final archetype is power hitter. So we can go into game and I can show you guys this. Just kind of show you how to tell what archetype hitters have. So a power hitter is when your power is significantly higher than your contact, and these guys are going to be prone to higher exit velos, but that's just because they have more power than other cards, and they will also get higher launch angles. So that's why you'll see a card like Santander hits a lot of like scammy, no PCI home runs. It's because he's getting more launch angle. So a lot of those swings that probably shouldn't be home runs are somehow. Don't ask me how it makes a ton of sense, but it does. Like power hitters get more no PCI home runs. So kind of helps you, kind of hurts you, because sometimes you're hitting pop-ups on pretty decent swings with them just because they're uppercut and everything, because they're a power hitter. So if you ever want to check, you can hold the right trigger till this little screen pops up, and you'll see under Ted Williams' card right here, it says balanced. Then that's how you can check. So other than that, you can always check. You can check a hitter's tendency. This is a very small thing, but it has quite the effect on cards. So you can see down here, Willie Castro, it says tendency right here. That is basically where your hitter would like to hit the ball to. So like a balanced hitter has equal timing windows to all fields. Down the middle is still going to be the biggest, but if the pitcher throws you inside, it's going to be normal. If they throw you outside, it's going to be normal. This is why cards like certain Hank Aaron cards, Frank Thomas in the past, I think, has had some cards like this. They will be opposite field hitters. What that does is you have bigger outside timing windows, so it's easier for you to put a good swing on an outside ball. But those inside balls are harder to generate a good swing on. Like your timing windows are going to be super tight, so you're either going to be early on it or you're going to be super late on it. And so that's what a opposite field hitter looks like. There's not a ton in the game right now, because generally it is the worst type of hitter you can be. Other than that, you have pull hitters and extreme pull hitters. So there aren't a ton of these. They are guys that you will see auto shifts on, like Corey Seager, Bryce Harper, Carlos Santana, I think, gets one. Yasmani gets one. There's a lot of guys like that. Mike Trout gets one. A lot of the guys that you perceive as having good swings with in game, a lot of that is because they are either pull hitters or extreme pull hitters, and players online know that one of the strongest pitches you can throw is a high and in fastball, especially if it has like outlier. So you kind of need extreme pull hitters to hit those pitches super effectively, but you can get away with balanced as well. Okay, so next thing on the agenda, I think, is going to be fielding. I'm not even going to get into bunting because it just kind of makes your bunts more accurate, makes them harder to be fielded. Durability is a fake stat. Durability, discipline, base running, aggressiveness, those are all just stats that are used to manipulate overall for the most part. Like the fact that Ted Williams has 125 discipline. If he had 0, would he still be a 99 overall with these stats? Probably. But they could have gave him like, you know, some crazy speed or something. So it's kind of just a stat that manipulates overall for the most part right now. You see it like with the chase card Acuna. That card's barely better than the live series, and he's just got like really high stats that don't matter that much, just the juices overall. So that's kind of my spiel on discipline, durability, base running, aggressiveness. Willie Castro is a great example of that, where like this Willie Castro card is basically a 99 overall, but his discipline's really bad, his durability is not great, his stealing's terrible, and his base running aggressiveness is terrible, and so it weighs down the cards overall. So next thing I'll talk about is fielding. So a lot of people, this is a stat that is thresholded. An 89 fielding player is not going to field any better than like an 80 fielding player. Those are both still going to have a gold shield. They reworked the defense system so you don't see the shield as much this year, but it's still there. So you kind of want to hit a new tier. That's where, like, you know, Ted Williams having 80 base fielding doesn't really matter. Corey Seager having 80 doesn't matter. I want to find one that would matter for you guys. Like Ketel Marte, right? Assuming you're playing him at second base, at his primary position, after you hit P4 with this card, he will now have diamond defense, which is just going to make him make pretty much all the routine plays. It's going to increase his chances of, like, when he dives for the ball to actually end up in his glove. It's going to give him better throwing animations, better double play animations, and just stuff like that. So fielding is thresholded. You got 60, you got 70, you got 80, and you got 90. So there's really no difference between a 99 fielding player and a 90 fielding player. So that is kind of a threshold stat. You would like to hit those thresholds. That's why, like, you know, if a new Ketel Marte came out, to make him the most meta card, the best for his overall, you'd probably prefer for them to give him like 85 fielding, so that you could super fractor him and parallel him and get him to diamond fielding. All right, so moving on. Arm is a linear stat. It is not thresholded in any way. The higher your arm, the quicker your fielder throws the ball. There used to be quirks called like sniper and stuff. They were just static quirks. They didn't actually make you throw the ball any harder. Those were just quirks that your card got assigned based on their arm and stuff like that. Quirks like that are gone now. So every quirk that you see does actually influence the game in some capacity, which is a good idea. So accuracy's pretty obvious what it does. It's not really an important stat because it's never hard for you to make a green throw. The only time you're really going to trip about arm accuracy is if you're playing cards like out of position, because they get such a big penalty that it makes it really hard to hit a green throw. But for the most part, arm accuracy is whatever. Like, it's not really an important stat. It's not hard to hit green throws. Where it does matter a little bit is it increases your blue throw window, which is your perfect throws, which, you know, sometimes you might have to hit a relay perfect and throw to the base perfect to get a runner out. So arm accuracy will help you there. So I'm not going to say it's a useless stat, but for the most part, it's useless. Reaction, I'm not sure how reaction works 100%, because you'll have a game where Aaron Judge just gets a ton of like blue jumps, which are perfect jumps in the field, and then you'll have a game where he can't get anything other than a yellow or a red. So I'm not sure if it's thresholded. I think it's like a linear stat, and just the higher your reaction, the higher chance that you get a good jump. But I've seen really good reaction fielders get bad jumps. I've seen really bad fielders get perfect jumps. So it's kind of random. It's another RNG element that I don't entirely love, but for the most part, the higher your reaction, the more likely you are to get green or blue jumps on the ball. So makes sense, but sometimes you gotta explain stuff. Speed is our next stat here. It's pretty self-explanatory. It does feel like it is a stat that's kind of manipulated by how tall your player is. Like it feels like Ellie just rounds the bases faster. And maybe that's just because he's more stretched out. So whenever he's sliding or something, he just has a bigger player model. But for the most part, I would say the bigger your player model, it does feel like they run a little faster, but it's probably just placebo. I would not look that much into it. Stealing, pretty obvious. It only affects you when you're auto stealing, but with how the servers are this year, you'd have to be a psychopath to be manual stealing a lot of the time. And so it just gives you a better jump. But at the same time, I've seen, base runners with 89 speed get really bad jumps, and base runners or steal, and I've seen base runners with like 50 steal get good jumps. So it's just another RNG element. It's similar to reaction where, the higher the number, the higher the likelihood, but they're still prone to getting bad jumps from time to time. And then base running aggressiveness is a useless stat. So the last thing I'm going to talk about with hitters here is quirks, and we're going to go over 2 quirks. I like first pitch hitter as well, especially on a guy like Mike Trout or something. I can't tell you how many first pitch home runs I've hit throughout the years with Mike Trout, because people just like to airmail like the first pitch of a game for some reason. But I don't think it's like an essential quirk or anything. These 2 right here are the only quirks you really need to concern yourself with, because dead red, breaking ball, both of these just give higher exit velos on pitches. So if you have both of them, every pitch that the pitcher throws you, you're going to just hit harder. So they are the 2 most essential quirks. They're the 2 most important quirks. Everything else is just kind of meh. Like situational hitter stops your PCI from shrinking as much and gives you like slightly better contact / clutch. Bad ball hitter gives you like a little bit of a bigger PCI, I think, and maybe a little bit exit velo on balls out of the zone. But for the most part, all of these quirks that you're seeing here, they just give you like a little bit of contact, like home body. So if I was playing, they've done testing on this. If you're playing like at home and at night with Ketel Marte, you'll get like the equivalent of like +6 contact / clutch. It's not the end of the world, and it's not really gonna make you hit the ball harder. So that's why I always say, wherever you see me doing a tier list video, I'm like, he has dead red, he has breaking ball. It's because those are the 2 most important quirks. They actually influence how you hit the ball, and they give you higher exit velos. That's why you'll just see a lot of times, if you've watched my gameplay, I'll call them like quirk swings, where like Corey Seager will just have his bat nowhere close to the ball and hit it out. That's just quirks. That's what quirks do for you. That's why like a card like Carlos Beltran, if he had breaking ball, would be insane. He's still incredible because of his stats, being a switch hitter and dead red. But if he had breaking ball, he would be over the top. So those are the quirks you need to concern yourself with. And we can go ahead and hint on it if you haven't already kind of picked up on the theme of the team here. Switch hitters. Being a switch hitter is the most important thing. In the past, it hasn't been make or break. Like when Chipper Jones was the collection reward, he was really good. He wasn't essential. Now, having switch hitters is essential because SCS has came up with the bright idea of making away pitches from the same-handed pitcher shrink your PCI, be it circle changes, be it sinkers, be it sliders. They all like shrink your PCI in some fashion. So you kind of need to have switch hitters to kind of mitigate that, and not end up just being up there with Scott Rowland and seeing 3 straight away sliders. So being a switch hitter is more important than it's ever been. Before, it was pretty much just placebo, and it made people hit better with cards. Now it's more of a essential thing, and I think you see that a lot in what cards they come out with, because Willie Castro was never getting like a card similar to Willie Castro would have never came out like 3-4 years ago, because switch hitting wasn't that important. It was a luxury. Now it's like an essential part of the game. So moving on, let's talk pitchers. So hitters took 19 minutes. Pitchers could probably take an hour, to be honest. So what makes a good pitcher? Well, it all really boils down to this right here. Pitch mix. Different people perform better with certain pitch mixes. Certain pitch mixes perform better at different ranks. Like a splitter fastball is one of the best tunnels, combos, sequences that you can throw in the game. And it gets infinitely better the more pitches you have to work off of it. That's why a guy like Roger Clemens is insane. And a guy like Hunter Green is really good on All-Star because you can work those two pitches, but you don't really have anything else to work off of it. So if I had to pick best pitch mix, it's John. And two things go into this. Number one, he has outlier, which we'll get to here in a minute. And number two, he has a forkball, a really slow forkball, where technically his speed difference, and we'll get to it here in a minute, is insanely high on the slurve and the four seam. But in reality, you can't really throw the slurve that much. But you can throw the forkball every other pitch if you want to. So that's where a card like John and his pitch mix is just insane. Because other than maybe you'd prefer him to have a cutter over a slurve. But other than that, this is pretty much the ideal pitch mix. So that's pitch mix. Let's talk about attributes. So stamina, pretty self-explanatory. It's how deep into a ball game your pitcher can go. I'm not sure what the 1-to-1 ratio is, but I want to say for every like point of stamina, you can throw like 0.8 of a pitch. I feel like 100 stamina is probably getting you 80 pitches before your pitcher's like really tired. Is how I would equate it. That's why most bullpen guys have like 25, 30 stamina. They're usually good for like 15 to 20 pitches. So that's just kind of how stamina works in the game. Yeah. So hits are pretty self-explanatory. Hits are the direct counter to a batter's contact. So the higher hits, the smaller your opponent's PCI is going to be, the harder it's going to be for them to time up your pitches, as well as to actually put good contact on it. So having high hits is what's going to get you a lot of pop-ups and even strikeouts, because it's going to shrink their timing windows just based on how hard it is to hit. Ks is the direct counter to vision. So the higher strikeouts you have, the less foul balls you're going to give up, and in theory, you're going to shrink your opponent's timing window. It's not super important. Like we've seen cards with low Ks be good, like Jordan Zimmerman, but it's nice to have. You would prefer that your pitcher's highest stat either be hits or walks, definitely not Ks. But having good Ks, it's like vision. It's supplemental. If he has 125 hits and 90 Ks, it's a good card. So, moving on, we have BB through 9. So, this is your pitcher's ability to limit walks, aka their control. So, this is the overlying factor for the par size that you see. Now, there's a lot that goes into par sizes, like what type of pitch you're throwing, where you're throwing it in the zone, stuff like that. But it is all controlled by your pitcher's walks. So a better example of this might be like Danny here. He has 98 walks, which isn't anything crazy. But then you have to kind of factor that in with his pitch control. So if you guys don't know how to, you click your right stick in and it pulls up pitch controls. So pitch controls are like vision, but for pitches. So the most important thing is still your walks. But when you add on insanely high pitch controls like this, it's almost multiplied to where like Danny can sit here and put a cutter in a corner every single pitch because he has 100 walks and 98 pitch control on a cutter, and he throws a slow cutter. The slower your pitcher throws a pitch, the smaller their par is going to be. It's not the biggest thing in the world, but I think that's why you see a guy like Roy Halladay is just never able to get his pars as small as a guy like Danny here, or even Like Tyler Rogers is always a card where you can just put a pitch directly in a corner every time. Darren O'Day, he's not in my bullpen anymore, but or like Eckersley, you can see Eckersley 101 walks, 99 pitch control on the slider and the sinker. So if you just want to put it in a corner every single time, he's going to be your guy. All right, so back to John. Feel like I kind of explained walks pretty good. John here is a victim of home run through 9. So thankfully the stat can only go to 99, but it does not exist in Diamond Dynasty or even gameplay modes. So what this used to do is it used to impact how hard the ball was hit on average. Now it doesn't. So John's overall, John is probably like an 87 overall card, 86 overall card, but they just gave him 99 home run through 9 to make him better. So that is a nice little overall inflator. And you'll see there will be some pretty poor pitching cards here, where like Rasmussen here, if he didn't have 99 hit home run through 9, he would not be this high of an overall. So SDS just kind of uses it to inflate overalls, like with this Whitey Ford card and stuff like that. So it's just kind of a fodder stat. I wouldn't put a lot of any weight into it, really. Pitching clutch is the direct counter to hitting clutch. So similar to hitting clutch, it should influence the pitcher's hits all of the time, and vice versa. Where if your pitcher has 125 clutch, but then like 70 hits, then, you know, it's going to average out to probably like 100, 110. So, you know, take what you will from that. Velo and break. Break is another really overblown stat, similar to vision in my opinion, where like, yeah, technically it makes a pitch move more, but most of what you perceive to be break is actually just the pitcher's delivery. Like Chris Sale's slider is not really breaking a lot more than other pitchers' sliders do. It's just that he's sidearming it, so it looks a lot different compared to other ones. Break does actually impact how much the pitch moves, drops, but there's also so much. Like pitcher's delivery impacts it a lot. What server you're on this year impacts it a lot. And then you just have pitches like sinkers and sliders where if outlier procs on that pitch, it breaks a different way. If it's thrown in a different part of the zone, it might break a different way, or it might float. So there's a lot of stuff like that you can't really count, to where break isn't really a stat to be putting too much weight into. All right, and now it's time for, okay, we'll wait. Or no, we'll do quirks first, actually. So you can see John has some nice quirks here. He has day player, that is the hitter equivalent of day player. Gives him like +3 hits, +3 clutch. If you're playing during the day, doesn't really matter. It's probably going to be, you know, active half the time, not active the other half of the time. Quirks like that really aren't worth putting any weight into, because unless you're going to make like a full day player homebody squad and just snipe home games, it's going to counteract itself half the time anyway. So it's not really worth putting anything into those quirks. Pick off artist doesn't seem to matter a lot. It's already really hard to pick people off this year. It used to be like if you took a 1-step lead at second base, you were always picked off. Not anymore. So pick off artist, wouldn't put a lot of weight into that. And then you have outlier. So outlier is the biggest quirk that a pitcher can have, because it fundamentally alters their pitch mix and just the pitches themselves. So outlier four seam is the best pitch in the game. It's the top end speed pitch. It's the best pitch to get strikeouts on for the most part, or at least it sets up other pitches to get strikeouts. An outlier takes a pitcher that is at most throwing 102 and makes them throw 104 sometimes. So that's a really, really good quirk to have, and it's why it is so highly coveted, because it's good on every difficulty. It's really hard to get strikeouts on All-Star and even Hall of Fame sometimes without outlier. And it just translates up onto higher difficulties like Legend. Don't really have to worry about GOAT anymore, but it translates up to Legend, and it just makes a card infinitely harder to hit, especially when you get on these bad servers. Sometimes it doesn't know how to process outlier. And then you can see that John actually has a second outlier. So he also has a slider outlier, which makes his slider top out at 97 sometimes. Sliders on like secondary, tertiary pitches aren't as reliable. Like, I think I can count on one hand how many times I've seen John throw his slider over 95 miles an hour. It's not a lot. So it's not what it used to be. Outlier on the slider, outlier on the two seam, outlier on a splitter, outlier on a knuckle curve like Craig Kimbrell has, isn't really something I would put a lot of weight into. It can just mess with the servers, but overall, it's not really something I would put a ton of weight into. There is also break outlier, which makes your pitcher's pitches not get as flat. In theory, the longer a starter goes in a game, their pitches are going to get flatter and not have as much break. But for the most part, you're pulling a starter the moment they get to yellow energy anyway, so it's not that important of a trait. And then I guess the last thing we will talk about is just individual pitches that you would like to see in a pitcher. So I hinted at it earlier, where instead of a slurve, you'd probably like to see John throw like a 90, 88 mile an hour cutter maybe. Would probably make him over the top good. In theory, I'm just gonna rank like every pitch for you. So sliders, pretty good pitch, especially like a bullet slider. Like John's not a great example because he has outlier, so it's just a different one than everybody else. But like scoop ball, if your pitcher's throwing like a 90 to 92 mile an hour slider, that's a pretty good slider. You want to try to avoid like loopy sliders. The exception to this is kind of like Josh Hader, Andrew Miller, Chris Sale, Matt Strahm to a lesser degree. Pitchers like that, where it's still objectively a bad pitch, but it's so slow and it's such a change of pace and it drops so much that you can use it almost more as a changeup / like a rollover pitch, where it's still not ideal and you'd still almost rather always throw like a 92 mile an hour slider, because then you can use it to like jam switch hitters, which is a very valuable tool for a starter to have, especially because a switch hitter is always going to be hitting to where the slider is going to be coming inside at them. So it's a really good pitch to jam hitters on, but there are some loopy sliders that can be good. Other than that, four seam, the easiest pitch in the game to hit, but also I think an essential pitch to have, because if you just have like a Corbin Burns type pitcher where he doesn't have a normal four seam and he's working a sinker and a cutter, people just start to piece that up eventually. You kind of need the normal four seam to keep hitters honest and avoid them just slamming their PCI. So four seam, really good pitch, the best pitch to have outlier on. Without it, you really need somebody that's topping out every single time with it. Sinker, cutter, both really good. I think sinkers are unreal this year because they just don't get hit hard. If your opponent is not hitting a perfect on a sinker you're throwing, they're just not hit hard at all. They almost always like lose a mile per hour exit velo compared to how they came in at. Like if I threw you a 95 mile an hour sinker, it seems like it always leaves the bat at like 94 and it's just a routine fly out. So I think sinkers are really good. Cutters are obviously really good. They still kind of have that floatiness to them, where if they get hung at all, they're like a guaranteed home run. But they're also the easiest pitch to fool people with because it is the most similar pitch looks wise to a four seam. It's like cutter, splitter, both look extremely similar to a four seam, but they both are obviously not a four seam. Changeup wise, so changeups are pretty overrated. A circle change is good to have because it looks like a sinker. So like if Scoop Ball didn't throw a sinker, I probably would not want him to have a circle change. Normal changeup, you don't see a lot of people like this. Like Al Leiter has it. Bob Gibson's probably the best example of a guy with a normal changeup because it's essential to his mix. Bob Gibson boils down to slider, four seam, circle change, 80% of his pitches. So he's a good normal changeup guy. Let's see, every curveball's bad, but slurves and sweepers are better than the rest. They just don't get hit hard for whatever reason. And the sweepers break is very similar to like a screwball, in my opinion, where it's just flat, it's loopy, and then it just darts at like the last second. So sweepers are growing on me. pretty much have to throw them as a chase pitch. You don't ever really want to be throwing them in the zone. But a guy like Dustin May is a good example of a guy with a sweeper slurve that is just like absolutely disgusting. So, and then we've got splitters, forkballs. Both of them are really good. They both look somewhat similar to a four seam. A splitter looks more like a four seam. The problem is splitters are traditionally thrown like 88 miles an hour plus. Where you see a guy like Randy this year. Randy actually throws a slower splitter than he's ever thrown. Usually his splitter is like 92 miles an hour. So it's kind of nice that he toned it down a little bit and throws a slower one now. But that's what makes a guy like John so dominant, is he has, like, he could, in theory, throw his four seam 104 and then throw his forkball 80, because you can bottom out 2 miles an hour under what the listed speed is here. So John has the biggest speed differential of any realistic pitcher in the game. I think Gagne could go from 104 to like 70. And him having a slurve now is kind of nice, but his other pitches are pretty bad. So hopefully this has been educational for y'all. Kind of dumped a lot on you, but hopefully this kind of helps you figure out what cards are good for you and your play style. It's not, like I said, it's not one for one, and it's not ever going to replace the tier list, because unless you guys are going to sit here and use every card and have years and years of experience with every card, then you're not really going to know. But, you know, at face value and quirks wise, hopefully this can help you kind of make decisions about what cards should be on your team or not. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, like, subscribe. Till next time.